So hello, and welcome to the Butterfly Session. My name is Estrellita Beatriz. I'm the New Work and Civic Programs Manager here at BCS. And before we begin, I want to offer a land acknowledgement for Baltimore Center Stage. I ask you to ground yourself in your seat and breath that is accessible to you as I read. Baltimore Center Stage acknowledges that the land beneath us, this place and this community, owes its vitality to the generations who have come before. Some were brought here forcibly to this land, some came here in search of ownership or simply a better life, and some have lived and stewarded this land for countless of generations. In the spirit of making arrest histories visible, we acknowledge that we are standing on the ancestral lands and occupied lands of the Piscataway Nation. The Susquehannock, Lenape, and Lumbee peoples have also cared for this land. The people are not a relic of the past. They continue to steward this land today and care with vitality and tradition. Their relations are numerous throughout Turtle Island, and they continue to grow. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and future. Let's take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, settlement that bring us together today. Please join us in uncovering such truth at any and all public events. And additionally, in the spirit of reconciliation, you can honor the indigenous peoples of this land by donating to Native American Lifelines, visiting or donating to the Baltimore American Indian Center and Heritage Museum, and supporting local indigenous artists. Please also visit our Indigenous Art Gallery located on this floor. The gallery represents a physical continuation of this land acknowledgement and a tangible reminder that respects the land rematriation and indigenous sovereignty. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As we also do this, it would be remiss of me not to mention the times that we are in. This is a political dialogue series, and there's a lot of political things happening. So collectively, I'm wondering if we can take 3 breaths together. The first 2 will be for us here in the community, and the third one will be giving out anything we want to those that are celebrating and also suffering in a bunch of different places in this political landscape. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of breaths with me. The first one in and out. The next one in and out. And the last one in and out. Thank you so much. As we talk through these topics today, I really want to encourage you to be sitting with your breath. So the Baltimore Butterfly Sessions is a civic dialogue series where we use art to catalyze conversation. So today we're going to encourage you to share your thoughts. So if you haven't met the folks around you, can we take a brief moment to introduce yourselves by saying hi to the neighbors directly around you? Feel free to give them your name if you would like. We'll take a few moments to do this. Thank you all for taking a moment to do that. Can I get a view of how many folks have been to a session before? We can either raise our hands or give some things. Oh wow, there's several. Can we get our hands together for our returnees? Thank you guys for coming back. And for those of you who is your first time, completely welcome. This season's sessions are themed around proposed and enacted legislation in our home state of Maryland and nationally, including our topic for tonight, which is the Community Reinvestment and Reparations Committee. Can I get a hand for that? Which has been stewarded by our civic partner, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. Can I also get a hand for them? Come on, you can do better than that. There it is, yes! Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle policy battle in Maryland began to focus on the legalization of the legalization of recreational cannabis, establishing reparations for the war on drugs. Through this establishment of the Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund, they have been able to achieve this objective. They now aim to expand the fight for reparations by using the Community Reinvestment and Repair Fund to establish revenues that will redistribute money into this fund to repair the harm done to Black people by the system of white supremacy. How about a hand for that? You'll hear more about Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle from our keynote, Dayvon Love, the Director of Public Policy at Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. Can I get a hand for him? Our artistic feature, Keyma Flight, the nationally acclaimed slam poetry champion, and our musical guest, Scott Patterson of Afro House, will also be helping us explore these themes of reparations and sovereignty throughout the night. And with no further ado, I actually want to turn it over to our musical guest, Scott Patterson. As he comes up, can we get some claps to give us our first song of the month? Let's give it up for Scott as he approaches the stage.
How's everybody doing tonight? Yeah. This song I'm gonna play for you, a song called South Carolina. I wrote this song because we used to live in South Carolina, and when we did, I was a child, and we had all kind of things. We had 3 gardens. We grew our own corn. We grew our own potatoes. We grew all kind of stuff. But then we left the farm to the city. And ever since then, I've been on this thing about being able to have for one's own family. Does that make sense? So I'm gonna sing this song. I wanna be a planter, said the little big man. I wanna feed my family with my little big hands. All the crops, they grow smaller, even though more people come. You can lead a man to water, but you can't make him drink up. We don't always have a need for all this technology. Yeah. So what does it really mean for our people to be free from under the knife of poverty, the sickness of white supremacy? There is no need for aggravation if you give the people reparations. Yeah, you can lead a man to water, but you can't make him drink up. When will they see they've lost their humanity? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Let's keep it going for Scott for a quick moment. Thank you, Scott. And I'd like now to invite our artistic feature up to the stage, Keyma Flight. Keyma exists today as an earth poet and anti-capitalist raised in Baltimore. She was on the Baltimore City Youth Slam team for 3 years in a row. Keyma also holds the title of the Hyperbole Slam champion in 2019, is won 6 of the Brave New Voices winners in 2018, and a 3rd place in the National Women of Poetry Slam in 2022. She is also the 3rd ranking poet in the Eastern region, with her pieces being in articles such as Vogue and Strategies for the Youth. Yeah, can we give it up for that? And not only does she do all this great work, but she is also part of the nonprofit Do More, where she works with the youth coordinator and is an administrative assistant. She uses her platform to advocate for radical spirituality and advancement of Black and LGBTQIA+ communities and a world that removes itself from suggestion and pushes towards acceptance. Give it up for Keyma.
Hello, how y'all doing? My name is Keyma Flight. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm here to do a little bit of poetry for y'all. I am a poet, so the way that I receive energy is through snapping. So if y'all hear that line that y'all like, please feel free to snap for me real quick. Can everybody snap real quick? Okay, come on, sexy popcorn. I like that. Yes. All right, so if y'all hear, y'all can snap. Anything that gives me energy, I would love to hear. So I'm gonna do a couple poems for y'all and then get out y'all hair. In the first term, a baby grows the fastest it ever will, builds new cells at rapid rates, and implants itself inside the wall of the body's womb. In its first term, the U.S. grew the fastest it ever will, built new cells at rapid rates, and implanted itself inside the wall of indigenous and African wombs. So why would they hit abort? Gave us express shipping on slaves. This country already knows how to deliver and expects us to do the same. America grants planned panic to unwilling bodies, because what else would you call an invasion? What else would you call a baby? Because what's the birth of a nation to the birth of a nation? This is America. They want you bearing children so they can bear arms or be long enough to play for the Bears and buried in every field they touch down on. Trust. This country already knows how to get away with murder, whether Viola Davis or like a viola they playing us. Black History Month is marches in February, because what does a march ever do? Why would a nation that started with 13% of its population in chains ever be pro-choice? The voice of murdered black babies rest in the pits of alligator stomachs. They stuffed black fetuses in jars and called it experimenting. Still doing the same thing with our bodies. Why would they be lax on new cells like they don't have Henriettas? Why would they care about giving black bodies an option? The only one you got is giving them kids up for adoption, because profits come from keeping us on welfare and food stamps, because you only stay hungry unless you keep eating. That's why they called the feds. It took a black president 4 terms times 2, and we still ain't 8. The only plan B we taking is Barack or The Rock. How we thinking we cracking the system when they put crack in the system, leaving you dried out from the sons you raising? We ain't great because we got Barry. How many dead black babies does it take for you to get it? Rename Lady Liberty, miscarriage, the way this country loves the blood of what could have been. You only terminate when they tell you to. How could abortion be legal in the same place the forced pregnancy of slave women was? This is the same breed, just different, cause America does not go back on what it does. And you got child support. What else would you call government assistance? Choice hasn't been given since this country's conception. What's the pain of a contraction to a white man's contract? Because you be manifest destiny every time you make a black baby. And you can't have God's plan without an unwilling body, so won't you be Mary? Have the baby you never planned to have? The baby that will be killed by this country anyways? And what, you tired of carrying the American dream? Tired of seeing yourself die? Nah, that's just morning sickness. You'll get over it. We need you numb anyways, because vulnerability breeds an army, and ain't no such thing as an unwilling soldier, just one that hasn't been broken in yet. So put your body to the test, give life to death, and surrender to America's will. Thank you for your cervix. Poem. Thank you. Appreciate that. I have one more poem for y'all, and then I'm gonna get out the way. In my life, I've known money flow like leaky faucet and lead pipelines. So poetry was my oasis. But writing don't pay the bills most days. I pray that I turn my 9 to 5 to a 9.5, because a 10 is the only thing I have to my name sometimes. Whether at a slam or in my savings, I'm a starving artist with an eating disorder, because these bills make me binge work shifts. The point of the paradigm is to pay us dimes, to be the middle passage every black artist gets caught in. I made it to the other side just to see the bodies the system left behind, so I can't help but feel like these numbers and this stage looking a lot like an auction. And I've asked for the numbers to go up. Am I bitter or a bidder? A traitor to the cost if I trade art for cost. And judges don't gotta adjust for inflation. Every day in America is about how the government keeps scores. And my time penalty will be my children being saddled with my debt like mules before I ever see 40 acres. I'm my own nonprofit. Does wanting change mean that's the only thing I'll get? I speak of unrest, so I guess it makes sense that I've been house hopping for over a year. But I don't even want a mansion. I just want a home. But I'm conflicted. How many stories do I have to build before my neighbor is evicted? Cause ain't that what a poetry competition is? They tell black poets we are the product, then wonder why our trauma is always advertised. Because the revolution does get televised on Amazon Prime and Netflix. Even liberation is a commodity. There is a monopoly on our voices. Don't know how many words I've slammed down my throat just to pay rent. Because if I don't follow respectability politics, I get indecent exposure. And when I'm worried if my phone will get shut off, I can't help but feel powerless, disconnected. When money is a shackle, but the shackle is a safety measure, you can't help but wonder how far the chain will stretch until it catches our necks like a leash. And these landlords be shepherds, guide us on a lease. The elite's interests will always be protected as long as they give just enough credit to keep black poets at bay. Say quotes from our poets like they putting our tongues on display, and I'm worried that if I turn my EBT to BET, I owe you someone that I'm not, because I'm not the pen that will ever reach 1,600 pen. But I'm worried that my success in writing means I have to make banknotes. What happens when you are your own sacrificial poet? Set aside your radical morals for mortgage. What happens when every step of the way feels like blood money? What then? I think that you're right. Because what if profit is permission? Admission from an audience that they want to see you more. whole and healthy. Wealth does not have to weigh down on others as long as we make unity a utility. I try to gaslight myself into being louder than a bomb. Try to be a lone revolution, but ain't no setting it off without community. And as long as greed is not the intention, I grant myself gratuity. But don't get it twisted. I still want these systems to fall because there are black poets out there who had to trade their spotlight time for the electric bill, and they are still wandering the streets, searching for change. Thank y'all.
Thank you so much for that wordsmithing, Keyma. I am now going to ask our volunteer readers, you know who you are, don't worry, they've already enthusiastically volunteered to come up to the podium to read some civic texts for the night. If you've been to a Baltimore Butterfly session, yeah, go ahead and come up. You know the deal. If you have not, if you are new here, we do take a moment to kind of read some civic texts. These can be pop culture articles, books, different things like that help us ground and really resonate within tonight's topic. So I'm gonna have Alicia come up first.
Hello and good evening, Keyma. Thank you so much. Yeah. My name is Alicia Patterson, and I will be reading an excerpt from an interview with Queen Mother Moore, a legendary figure in the Black liberation struggle. This interview was conducted over 3 decades ago, and the audio files were digitized as part of NYU 10-minute library's oral history of the American Left Project. After the emancipation, where the Union Army deserted our people, and the North withdrew its forces from the South, leaving us to the mercy of the people under whom we had been slaves. And so, after that, not only had they imposed citizenship on us, this is something very serious. They imposed citizenship upon us. Instead of allowing us to, giving us reparations, restitution, because after all, they had changed us in the course of slavery from an African to a Negro. Then, of course, they imposed their citizenship. And after they imposed citizenship upon us, which some people might think was magnanimous, after always getting your citizenship, which actually was a violation of our human rights. Because we should have had a I practiced this word and now I'm like, bloop. Plebiscite. Okay, great, thank you, plebiscite. You should see there should have been restitution, reparations, a plebiscite for us. There was none of that. So that citizenship is illegal. But then after they did that, what did they do? They enacted their black codes. Their black code laws deny us the very benefits of the citizenship that they imposed on us. You see? So here we were, citizens without. We had the burden of citizenship without any of the benefits. That's happened in our case. That's why we have to go way back to our enslavement in order to get a correct position from our people, and anybody who glosses over that whole slavery period will never get a correct, never have a correct analysis of our status in the United States. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Francisco, and I'll be reading an excerpt from Should America Pay? Slavery and the Raging Debate on Reparations, a book by Raymond Winbush, PhD. This chapter is entitled The United States Debt Owed to Black People by Haki R. Madhubati. Now today, in this new century and millennium, it is documented, confirmed, and agreed upon by all thinking and all well-meaning people that debt is owed to Native Americans and Black people forced to laugh when there is nothing funny, to smile when they are in pain, to demean themselves on stage, in film, television, and videos, to dance when their hearts hurt, to accept delusion as truth, to lie to their children in the face of contradiction, to pray to a God that does not look like them, to pay compounded interest on the wealth they created, to sell their souls for acceptance in a fairy tale, to mortgage their spirits for another people's history, to support white people's affirmative action with centuries of black labor and taxes, to create America's music and be denied the fortunes made for others, to see clearly and act as if they are blind, to act stupid in the eyes of a fearful rulership, to say yes when they really mean no. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Karana, and I will be reading an excerpt from Reparations for the War on Drugs, an article by our keynote speaker, Dayvon Love, published by the Afro. Reparations are about providing the investments necessary for Black people to be able to build the institutional structures to practice freedom. We cannot be a free people if we are dependent on institutions outside of our community for our survival. Black people need an independent ecosystem of institutions that can interact with the larger society from a position of strength and not be reliant on the benevolence of others outside of the community. The mainstream media have avoided this frame for reparations in favor of a liberal mainstream rendering. This would empower the nonprofit industrial complex to expand its control over the institutions that govern Black civic, economic, and political life. Thank you.
Let's give one really loud round of applause for our volunteer readers. Volunteers, y'all. Sincerely, thank each and every one of you for deciding to participate with us tonight. Before we move on to our second song from Scott Patterson, I wanted to take a moment to introduce him properly. Scott Patterson is the co-founder and artistic director of Afro House, a Baltimore-based organization committed to creating disruptive music culture. Through Afro House, Patterson leads a contemporary ensemble that creates symphonic performance art pieces. He, alongside his wife, Alicia Patterson, and their children, channels the creation of art to disrupt a normative idea about human beings. While Scott comes up and is doing the second song, I really want you to, if you feel comfortable, turn to your neighbors that you made friends a little bit earlier and maybe talk about how you can actively participate in the reinvestment in Baltimore City. What is your part in reparations? Scott.
Open your eyes and escape the darkness. Enlighten your soul to fire. Burn on through and keep it coming. Show the people the way through the tunnel. Say it again. Open your eyes and escape the darkness. Yeah. lighten your soul to fire. Burn on through and keep it coming. Show the people the way through the tunnel. Though you may never see the promised land, no, still you must carry on. There's a voice that cries out to forever, yeah, so you will never be alone, alone. My people, you will never be alone, oh no. There's a voice that cries out to forever. Outstretched hands for the weary. Come with me and fly over the sea. I need some audience participation if you don't mind. Now I'm gonna sing something. I just want you to sing it back if you can. We need, you try it. That's right. We need reparation. I can't hear you. Say it, we need reparation. Here we go. We need reparation. Reparation. Say we need reparation, 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 reparation. We need reparation. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all sound good.
Wow, let's give it up for Scott Patterson from Afro House. Can we also get a little extra loud for his whole family who is with him at the table tonight? Now it's time for our keynote speaker, Dayvon Love, to come up and join us on the mic. But before we do, I would like to read his bio a little unedited so you get to know a little bit more about him. So Dayvon Love, is the Director of Public Policy at Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle and is the Baltimore-based political organizer for, I'm so sorry. I got so nervous. So sorry, let me start again. Thank you. Dayvon Love is a Baltimore-based political organizer and director of public policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. This grassroots think tank advances the public policy interests of Black people. In 2010, Love co-founded Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, one of the many organizations that successfully pressured the state of Maryland to disband its plans to build juvenile jail downtown. Yeah, let's give it up for that. LBS has also led legislative efforts and advocacy efforts regarding criminal justice reform, youth and community empowerment. Dayvon is also the author of Worse Than Trump, The American Plantation, a book that offers an important critique of American political left and a political alternative to the exploitative relationship that Black people have with white institutions. Dayvon has also authored When Baltimore Awakes, which is a comprehensive critique of the way that white supremacy is embedded in the human/social service sector in Baltimore itself. Also has written the article that we read as a civic text, and just so you know, we have a bunch of copies printed out at the Leaders of the Beautiful Struggle table. Please do stop by, get that article, and come see a little bit more about how you can support them. Can I turn the mic over to you? Let's give it up.
All right, good evening, everyone. I want to first thank Center Stage for organizing this event. Give them a round of applause. Also want to thank Scott Patterson and Keyma Flight for your performances this evening. Give them another round of applause, please. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about reparations as a larger frame, and that's going to empty into the conversation about the specific legislative work that LBS has been and continues to be engaged in, and then I'll entertain some questions. I'll say a little bit more about Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We're a grassroots think tank, as was mentioned before. We have what I would describe as a revolutionary Pan-African nationalist perspective, understanding the importance of Black people collectively practicing sovereignty as the basis for our ability to practice freedom in this larger society, which is really a fundamental human condition, or a fundamental human right that human beings, in order to be able to practice freedom, is an essential feature. And I'm going to delve a little bit more into that. But first, like I said, I want to just give some framing. There are three different registers to discuss history. There's history as a series of chronological events. There's the notion of historicity, one's relationship to the forward flow of human history. And then there's historiography, right? The dynamics, the power dynamics that determine which narratives of history are made most available. I want to talk about the notion of historiography. It's important when we think about our contemporary society, that is the project of European domination of the world, that is the defining feature of the past 500 years of human history. So when you think about the European Renaissance, the notion of truth through science, right, the emergence of Europeans, really it's the last branch of the human family to enter the arena, marked as civilization, as John Henrik Clarke once said. That when you think about the fact that everything that this society had, the intellectual architecture of the society is structured in such a way that is predicated on the notion of white supremacy and notions of Black inferiority. In fact, so much so, when you think about, for instance, the academic discipline of Egyptology that emerges in the 19th century primarily to theorize the ancient Egyptians out of African history into European history, right? An entire academic discipline. Understanding that if ancient Africans have civilization to contribute to human society, then the justification for enslavement falls apart, right? And so there was an intentional effort. It was a part of the cultural personality that Europe had to develop in order to justify its exploitation of Africans. And if you look at many of the foundational European scholars in the European canon, Hegel, who described Africa as a place where history doesn't happen, right? It's important to note that that canon and the basis of the kind of cultural ethos of Western civilization requires the notion of the denigration of people of African descent. And that's important because, as John Henrik Clarke also once said, that if all we know about the history of Black people is enslavement, then everything else looks like progress. And that is an important framework to understand that we're socialized to operate within the European imagination. And while operating within the European imagination and thinking about the societal propaganda of notions of Black inferiority, I mentioned some of the examples of ancient society, but even contemporary society when you think about, for instance, the term crack baby, which is a pop culture term. It has no medical basis, right? But it's a term that emerged concurrent with the war on drugs. Birth of a Nation, first motion picture film that depicted, black people as inherently brutal, is prone to criminality. So these are the tropes that are a part of the collective American consciousness, and they're so embedded in the collective American consciousness that, in fact, notions of white supremacy and black inferiority are rational beliefs given the propaganda that's made most available to us. It's important to recognize that because one of the things as a conceptual frame is for us to understand people of African descent before the intervention of Europeans into the lives of people of African descent. And I would argue that for many of us, our consciousness is so molded by notions of white supremacy and European domination that many of us could not imagine the notion of Africans operating in arenas marked as high levels of civilization, right? In fact, I'll tell a story that I tell pretty often, that I was a debate coach years ago, and I was teaching with a gentleman who was very learned in African history. He said, Dayvon, Europeans were traveling the Atlantic Ocean before Europeans were. And my first thought was, why do we always have to have these conspiracy theories of black people doing stuff first? We already have the sociological evidence of racism in society. It makes it harder for people to believe us. And then I came across a YouTube video of Ivor Van Sertima giving a lecture about They Came Before Columbus, and I read the book. And there were two conclusions that I came to. The first was that not only were Africans traveling the oceans before Europeans were the last people to think the world was flat. In fact, Europeans were like the laughing stock of the world to believe the world was flat. But the other thing that I had to ask myself was, why was I so willing to be dismissive of the idea of Africans navigating the oceans? And I had to conclude that I had internalized notions of white supremacy that made it difficult for me to imagine Africans operating at those high levels of civilization. So that's important in thinking about our collective consciousness about ancient African societies, because often culture in this society is rendered to mere artifacts instead of a resource, right? That many of the technologies and methods and instruments of human organization often use Greece and Rome as their intellectual and cultural resources as the basis for how they develop. That's why there's a lot of Latin in legal scholarship, right? That's why even many of the buildings, the government buildings, are modeled after Greece and Roman architecture, because there's an understanding of the rich cultural resources that serve as the basis for the development of this society. But again, many of us aren't familiar with the fact that, for instance, the first medical doctor, Imhotep, who is actually named in the Hippocratic Oath, he's called a Greek name, but Hippocrates, who was the so-called father of medicine, right, talks about his teacher, Imhotep, right, who precedes him, right? And so when you think about Pythagorean theorem, right? Pythagoras studied in Egypt, right? And if you look, and all you gotta do is look at the pyramids to look at the kind of mathematical and engineering expertise that you see in ancient Africa. They're practicing cesarean sections in ancient Africa. There was a particular technology around smelting steel, where in what is modern day Tanzania, they were smelting steel 1,500 to 2,000 years before Europeans were, using semiconductor technology, right? Using electric current as the basis for being able to smelt steel. So there's a large array of examples. I'll give one last example. Ivan Van Sertima actually talks about in his book on black people in science. He narrates a person who was in the Cairo Museum, and there was an exhibit of birds. And the person notices that one of the structures in the exhibit was not a bird. He noticed that there were wheels on it. And in inspecting that structure, what they realized is that it was an aerial gliding device that predated, I think it was in the 1950s when this story happens, that predated it by about 1,000 years. And the reason they put it in the section with ancient bird species is because it was beyond their scope of imagination that Africans would have thought to develop an aerial gliding device. And again, the way that we are socialized in this society, for many of us, again, people who don't have overt beliefs of black inferiority, there's some of us that notion is an offensive thought to us, offensive to the very logics that we've internalized because of the narrative of this society being the most advanced society that's ever existed. One last example, and this actually, when you think about our family, our Native American family, when you look at the establishment of the American Constitution, American democracy as some kind of miraculous experiment in democracy. Europeans who had not practiced democracy in Europe came over to the United States, magically developed a system of governance that they had never practiced before. Right? That sounds ridiculous. That's because it is ridiculous. Because they borrowed heavily from the practice of democracy of the Iroquois nation in the northeastern region of what is now the United States. Right? So I go through all of that, which may in some ways seem unrelated to the conversation of reparations, to talk about the fact that the framework that is often used to talk about people of African descent is from the perspective of us primarily being victims of European domination. And while we are victimized by that system, we are more than just the oppression that governs the society that we live in. And unfortunately, when you think about the way that our suffering is narrated, it's narrated in such a way that there is a paternal relationship to black people, right? That in many ways, some of the folks that see themselves as our allies, that they relate to us the way that people relate to their pets. You love them, they're cute, right? But your relationship to your pet is primarily one of a superior-inferiority relationship, right? That you don't see that pet as having the capability to take care of itself, right? And one of the things that colonialism has robbed us of is a very basic notion that emerges from nature, which is that you don't have to teach a worm what to do to survive. It knows what to do to extract from this world, to perpetuate its species. It's a very natural impulse, right? And that is something that people of African descent has been robbed of because of the societal propaganda from popular culture, academia, and the institutions that are responsible for socializing us. So I'm going to transition to some of our work on police accountability. Because when you think about the images of police brutality and the way that those images were circulated nationally, that one of the basis, again, many activists that I think mean well, the basis for their discussion about police brutality was about trying to get white people to recognize the humanity of people of African descent. And going back to that notion of historiography, that is the frame that we're taught history through. The frame we're taught is that there was racist white people and Martin Luther King came along and there was this moral awakening where they recognized our suffering and that they saw us being bit by dogs and shot by water hoses, and they had this moral awakening and decided to not be racist anymore, right? And that is the historiography that we're given as to how we're taught to think about people of African descent. But when you think about what ended enslavement, right? It wasn't a moral awakening, right? When you think about the Haitian Revolution, right? That inspired rebellions all throughout the 18th and 19th century, right? That put pressure on the American North, for whom economically they could sacrifice enslavement because they had been further industrialized. The South was an agricultural economy, so they were less willing to give up enslavement, right? But those rebellions from the North, combined with the economic competition they were engaged in with the South, made it in the North's interest to decide they wanted to end enslavement, right? So it wasn't a benevolence that caused the end of enslavement, but it was people of African descent operating with a level of autonomy and sovereignty that forced this country to end enslavement. And similar to the civil rights movement, when you think about Brown versus Board of Education and the civil rights movement, they were concessions to Cold War politics. So what actually gets black people progress in the society is not petitioning white people to recognize our humanity, but it's building the power necessary to force the society to make the concessions that it makes. And so unfortunately, I think too many activists have been socialized with this notion around petitioning white people to recognize our humanity as the basis for their activity. And what you saw a lot was those images of our suffering, and the idea is if we just expose white people to our suffering, they'll change. Well, LBS took a very different posture. The Black freedom struggle, when you think about the Black Liberation Army, for instance, or the Black Panther Party, and one of the places where there was actually coalition between some of the more moderate civil rights organizations would emerge from the 60s and 70s, in addition to the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, Fair Housing Act, was community control of public resources, particularly community control of law enforcement. And so that was the posture that LBS took, that the greatest deterrent to brutality against our community is our community being armed with the power to discipline those, to punish those that harm folks in our community, right? The institutional power to do so, right? And what we experienced was that there were attempts at political leadership in this state to obscure the notion of community power, community control, right? And to give us things like body cameras or more training, which is good, but that's not power, right? So when we go to reparations, we saw that recreational cannabis was a political inevitability in Maryland as it was being legalized in states around the country. And we were clear that there was an economic opportunity. And so we set out to advocate. Now, we understand the importance of Black people getting into the business, but we were also clear that the communities impacted by the war on drugs should not receive compensation predicated on participation in the industry. So that's why we focused on the tax revenues. And so the idea being that as a condition for legalizing recreational cannabis in the state of Maryland, that we would do our part in using the political power that we've been able to develop over our 13 years of existence to ensure that it does not pass unless there is reparations to the communities impacted by the war on drugs. And so what we were able to do in 2022, when both presiding officers in the State House had decided that cannabis was going to be legalized, that what we did was we, with the help of Senator Joe Carter, who had a piece of legislation that had the community repair and reinvestment fund that was mentioned earlier, where there was a leadership bill that actually had a different fund that was more like a traditional nonprofit in state government. And we were able to get 4 of the Black senators on the Finance Committee to organize themselves to essentially condition that bill moving out of the committee on our language from Senator Carter's bill being put into the bill that would eventually move out of the Senate to establish that fund. What that fund does is a few things. One is that 35% of the revenues from recreational cannabis goes into this fund. Each jurisdiction gets a percentage of that fund. That percentage is determined by that jurisdiction's contribution to statewide cannabis possession charges from 2002 to 2023. The idea being that those jurisdictions that would hit the hardest will get the largest percentage of the resources. And that each jurisdiction has to pass a law that determines how they spend their portion of those resources. Because one of the things about reparations, and the reason why I started the way I started, is because it's not merely just about investing in the community, right? Because in some ways, investing in the community has turned into investing into a white-controlled nonprofit industrial complex that profiteers off of our suffering. So a key part of reparations is about Black people's control over the resources to build the institutions needed for us to practice the sovereignty we once were able to practice before the past 500 years of European domination of the world, right? And so each jurisdiction determining how it spends its portion of those resources was important to empower the community with the maximum opportunity to be able to impact how those resources are distributed. And so that was established in 2022 and 2023. The Baltimore City Council established the Baltimore Reinvestment and Reparations Commission. In fact, on Tuesday in Prince George's County, modeling their legislative mandate off of what we did in Baltimore City, calling theirs the Community Restoration and Reinvestment Board, essentially passed their bill, actually this past Tuesday, and we're working with folks in Montgomery County to do something similar. So I'll end by saying this, is that one of the ways that white supremacy operates in our consciousness is that we, as I mentioned, the historiographical perspective of petitioning white people to recognize our humanity. And I think so many of us are conditioned to think that way, that when black people are able to win on our own terms, for some people it's hard to even fathom. Because again, so much of what we get exposed to is us trying to get white people to like it enough to move it along. And one of the things I'm most proud of at LBS is that our base is black people, right? Now, people that want to, anybody that wants to support LBS is welcome to support us, but our base, who we're accountable to, is black people. And what I'm most proud of is that our proof of concept is that that base is the source of our power to be able to accomplish the things that we're able to accomplish. When people earlier on in our career would tell us, all that black stuff's not gonna work, you're eventually gonna have to grow up and do this the way that everyone else gets stuff done. And what I'm most proud of is that we've been able to do the work that we've been able to do, being accountable to black people, being reliant on our base and our community as our source of power. No white people have veto power over what we do. And we're able to engage white people from a position of power, right? We're able to reject their benevolence and their paternalism, right? And to the extent that white people engage us, they understand that. And it is that position that is the most effective instrument for black liberation. So anyone that tells you that you got to figure out how to make sure that white people are comfortable enough with you, right, in order to have an impact on the community, I submit to you that LBS is one of many examples of the notion of black sovereignty as the basis for being able to be an effective advocate to deliver material conditions and changes to black people. So I'll stop there and entertain any questions you all have.
No, I just wanted to say, really appreciate, your stance on reparations. Whenever I've been in the conversation of reparations, it's always towards the bent that it was something that can be given to us, as opposed to something that we really have to take. We really have to have for ourselves with our own hand. We grab with our own hand. We build with our own hand. So I just wanted to say, I really appreciate that take on it, as far as it being a thing of controlling economics, as opposed to having economics given or poured on to us. Being able to have our own communities, healthy communities, what it means to us to be a healthy community. Like that to me is real reparations. But then there's also the biggest thing I really appreciated was the idea of policing that. Because to me, a healthy community, a healthy black community in a white supremacist society is a dangerous thing. If our societies have been the mules for our country, if all of a sudden the mule is like, I'm no longer a mule, I'm a Mustang, and I roam free, that's a dangerous animal. Not to say that we're animals, but and so I just really appreciate that take on reparation, and I agree with you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Forgive me if I go off topic, but I'm new to the city, and it seems like there's a lot of focus and investment on home ownership. And I was just wondering if your organization was part of some of the discussions around shaping policy and how that looks, or just kind of what your thoughts are as far as that, as far as helping to build up like the economic base of people of color.
So I'll say a few things. The first is that while I work, we don't have direct legislative advocacy on housing. There are folks who we partner with who are. One person that I want to mention, I was actually with her last night, Ms. Denise Jones-Dorsey is working with the Community Land Trust here in Baltimore, looking at increasing black home ownership. So I would encourage people to look at her work. One of the things I will say in addition to that is that, one of the things that happens when we talk about particularly black economic power is that there are times where there's a slippage between conversations around individual black people accumulating wealth, or a handful of black people accumulating wealth, versus collective wealth creation. And while individual black people being able to access wealth is important, I think it's important that we're, and not saying that you're doing this, but I think it's important that we're clear the distinction to get to collective wealth creation for the masses of black people that don't have access to the instruments of wealth creation requires political power, right, and policy that distributes wealth in a way that working class black people have access to, and looking at models of ownership that aren't just relying on singular individual people owning property, but looking at democratic ways of black folks collectively having ownership of property, land, and all kinds of things in order to ensure that the masses of our community benefit.
I thought there was some mention that Illinois was giving reparations to either Native Americans or African Americans.
So it's a few things. So there's the Evanston, Illinois example where they took cannabis, recreational cannabis revenues and took it to assist black families that wanted to have a down payment on owning a house. Evanston's a suburb of Chicago, as mentioned before. Illinois also, in the past few years, I forget which year it was it 2020 or 2020? 2019. Sure. Illinois passed it legalized recreational cannabis and established a fund that they call reparative, right? I don't think that we would consider it reparations because it's set up like a very traditional grant program, and much of the resources go to very traditional white-led corporate nonprofit institutions. But they give a substantial amount of resources in the name of being reparative to the war on drugs. So that's what I know about that's happened in Illinois.
Can we give it up for the leaders of a beautiful struggle that are here with us tonight? Can we also just do a big group thank you to the leaders of a beautiful struggle? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Oh, I'm gonna put this mic back and invite Scott up to come up for our final song and move over here. Yeah. Now everyone, we're at the time of the night where our musical guest, Scott Patterson, is gonna come up and close us out with a song.
Everybody, give yourselves a beautiful round of applause. I think this has been my favorite butterfly session. My colleagues who've been on the stage blessing all of us, just want to say thank you. Thank you. Let's take the high road to Paradise Land. We'll walk there together, hand in hand. Yes, we will, my love, will journey on and leave our old world behind. 'Cause heaven is here on earth for those who find the way into a life of peace. The Freedom Day, a Freedom Day, Freedom Day, Freedom Day, Freedom Day. We walked in the desert for 400 years, slaves to the pyramid scheme. We're bound together by chains of hate, but to die alone in this world is our fate. So take off my shackles and I'll run away to a nirvana, the new Freedom Day. Freedom Day, Freedom Day, Freedom Day, Freedom Day, yeah.
Freedom Day. And inside, you cannot hide. When you found the way to the Freedom Day. And inside, you cannot hide. And when you found the way, oh yeah, a Freedom Day, new Freedom Day. A Freedom Day. Thank you. Thank you, brother.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Can I get a big, huge round of applause for everyone who has graced the stage tonight? We had our volunteer readers. We had Scott Patterson of Afro House. We had Keyma Flight, our wonderful artistic feature. And we had, of course, had our keynote speaker, Dayvon Love of Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. I do want to mention a couple of things before we end the show. First and foremost, I want to mention that our next Baltimore Butterflies session of the season will be right here in this lobby, January 26th, and we will be celebrating the inaugural year of the Trans Equity and Health Act, so we hope that you come back to join us. We also here at Baltimore Center Stage have Art-Centric's production of Cinderella, where they are taking the classic Roderstein and Hammerstein Cinderella and taking it to Africa. Starting previews here on November 25th. Please check out our website, centerstage.org, for more info on our community nights for Cinderella and other events coming up at Baltimore Center Stage. You're more than welcome to stick around the lobby to learn more about how to support Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. They have a table right over there. Please make sure to pick up an article on reparations and also peruse the Indigenous Art Gallery, or you can just continue to talking to your neighbors and new besties that I hope you made tonight. I hope you came here for the community. I hope you stayed for the conversation, and I hope you leave with a deeper civic connection to Charm City. Thank you and have a lovely night.